It's finally over, guys. It is the end of another up and down decade. We've come a long way. We've come from ending one decade, going to the finals, to 2 decades of us just not quite sure who we are. There's a lot to unpack. So for my diehards, buckle up, get your popcorn, get your water, get your sodas, and get your hot takes, because we're about to go down a not so fun memory lane. Let's go. What's going on, CK Crew? It's your boy CK2K, and by this point, not quite, but maybe, but almost Happy New Year. It's your boy CK. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, like this video if you haven't already. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so you can get these videos every time I drop them. Your boy has been consistent, and you know what is also consistent? The fact that we have another new year upon us. Oh, I don't know if you guys know, it's got a new mic. Not sure how much more crispy I sound, but what's good? Before we get into this video, as always, letting you guys know, new merch is up. The Mitchell Robinson merch line and the CK Metro designs are up. Go check them out. We have a discount code of CK Crew up until tonight. So if you're seeing this in 2020, the discount code is gone, but the merch is not going anywhere. Go click on the link in the description, pick yourself up some. Mine is on its way. I can't wait to show you guys. But if you see the designs, they're dope. I'm really proud of them. Hope you guys like them too. Pick them up. Now let's get into the real subject of this video, and that is the last decade of Knicks basketball. Now the question I ask myself is, do I honestly think that this decade was a better decade than the decade before? Because we know the best decade in Knicks, well, I mean outside of the 70s, but probably one of the most fun decades in Knicks history would be the 90s, because that's probably the most memorable for a lot of the OG Knicks fans. I can't put myself in there, even though I am a 90s kid and I did watch Knicks basketball, not to the extent of a lot of you guys in my comment section and outside in the Knicks world that know a lot more about the true winning feeling of being a Knicks fan, even though we kept getting stopped by Michael Jordan and a few times by some big men known as Tim Duncan and Hakeem Olajuwon, but that's neither here nor there. The point of the matter is that right now, this generation, ever since we cross the timeline of the 2000s, that we have not been able to reach that same level of consistency, or really that same level of excitement. And in the early 2000s, we know that mountain just was a steep drop, but there were a bit of peaks and valleys here in this past decade, even though it might not seem that way with how we've looked in the last few years. So hopefully I can bring some light to this very up and down decade, but we also have to go through the downside. But before I do that, let's jump into the 2000s decade, being from the 2000 and 2001 season all the way down to the 2009 NBA season. From year 2000 to 2009, the New York Knicks ended with a record of 327 and 493. But we did find playoff berth at least 2 times in that decade. And as I said earlier, it was in the beginning side of that decade as we got to the playoffs in the 2000 to 2001 season with a 48 and 34 record, even though we lost in the first round that year. Our coach was Jeff Van Gundy, and 3 years later, we would reach the playoffs again in the 03-04 season with a 39 and 43 record, losing as well in the first round when we had a carousel of head coaches from Don Chaney to Earl Williams all the way to Lenny Wilkins. There were some notable players that we did have in a Knicks uniform in that time, from guys like one of my favorites, Stephon Marbury, David Lee, Allen Houston, and Jamal Crawford. Now there's guys that I'm missing, and I know a lot of you guys are favorites of, like, you know, I didn't add Latrell Sprewell and stuff like that, but to me, and Allen Houston even barely makes it over on this list, but a lot of those guys were more so like the end of the 90s, early 2000s. But let me know in the comments below what you guys feel about that. To me, I'm marking it down to those 4 players, and Jamal Crawford barely makes that list. It's just, to me as a fan, because that decade was probably my most memorable decade of being, well, no, I think this past decade is probably my most memorable, but that was a decade where I was really getting into basketball, and Jamal Crawford was one of my favorite players that we didn't get to keep very long, so I want to add him on the list just for a personal factor. But let me know who was a notable player to you in that first decade. Now back to the players I listed. Stephon Marbury, who you could say, some could argue it's between him and David Lee, was one of our most notable of the notables being that he averaged 18.2 points per game off of 44% shooting with 7 assists in his 5-year tenure from the 03 season all the way to the 08 season. He did make the All-Star game 2 times as a New York Knick. Now after that, we would have to mention, like I said, Allen Houston, who was the OG that crawled over from the late 90s and was a Knick all the way until the 05 season when he eventually retired. And he did make an All-Star team 1 time in his 5-year spurt in that decade, averaging 18.4 points per game, 2.3 assists per game, shooting as well a 44% clip. And then, as I mentioned, Jamal Crawford, somebody that I wish stayed with the Knicks for a little bit longer, but he went on to be the player that we all know him to be, the 6th man that every team needed, and he did good with that. But while he was with the Knicks, he was putting in an empty 17.6 points per game, 4.4 assists per game, shooting 41% from the field. He was with the Knicks for 5 years, did not make an All-Star team as you'd expect, and the Knicks we were not good in the tenure he was there. It was very sad, as well as some of those years that Stephon Marbury. But things did start to look a little promising on the closing end of that decade when a certain white boy that we drafted in the 2nd round or late 1st round came into the picture and looked to be a lot better than what people initially expected when we first got him. David Lee was drafted in 2005 at the 30th pick in the NBA draft. Now, in David Lee's tenure as a Knick, he was with us for 5 years as well, until he ultimately decided to go on to Golden State and get his bag as well as the key to the city when we decided to go elsewhere, and we'll talk about that later when we get to the next decade. David Lee brought a lot of hope to the Garden. There was moments like the tip-in game winner, that's probably the biggest David Lee moment, from just a lot of the grinded out double-doubles that he would go out there and we would win games that we should not have won. And David Lee was just that light, that at the time, the light at the end of the tunnel, where we thought that maybe we found a guy that is going to help turn this thing around. Now, to be honest, again, I was a kid at that time, but to be honest, you look at it now, it's like David Lee was one of those guys, and even when in his tenure with the Golden State Warriors, was one of those guys that he's going to be a do-it-all kind of player for you, but he wasn't really the messiah to take you over to the next level. The Golden State Warriors saw that, and luckily he was able to go out with a ring. Shouts to David Lee. Of a lot of our draft picks, I think David Lee's probably one of the only ones that we can coin to be anything positive in that first decade, or the first decade of the 2000s. You know what I'm trying to say. I know a lot of Knicks fans are sitting there like, oh, CK, don't go through them. We got to go through them, y'all, because we drafted some players that turned out to be some bums. Some turned out to be all right, but a lot turned out to be some bums. And let's quickly go down this list, shall we? Even though he was not a Knick for very long, we did have a nice pick in Trevor Ariza in 2004 in the 2nd round. We did not see it happen for long. Trevor Ariza was probably one of my favorite draft picks, even though we didn't keep him for long, because he was one of those guys that reminded me of Tracy McGrady, not in the scoring sense, but how Tracy McGrady looked when he was drafted. Trevor Ariza had the same ability, where he was a very athletic player, where he had that upside that maybe he could go to that next level and be that Tracy McGrady-esque player for us. Trevor Ariza still in the league, so we did a thing. Then the very following year, we drafted Channing Frye at the 8th pick, and as I said earlier, David Lee at the 30th pick. The next year, we drafted Ronaldo Bachman in 2006, as well as Marty Collins. 2007, we got one of my still to this day favorite Knicks, Wilson Chandler. Now, Wilson Chandler was very up and down. Wilson Chandler had that summer league that got a lot of us excited, along with a guy that I think a lot of people forget, and I cannot remember his first name. It was, oh my God, I gotta Google it. His last name was Nichols. Demetrius Nichols. That was right. They were fun. We signed to the 10-day contract, and he didn't end up being anything. But Wilson Chandler and Demetrius Nichols looked like a fun little tandem in the summer league and a little bit in the preseason. But it was Wilson Chandler that ultimately got that, maybe we got something here. Let's see what this turns out to. And you know what? To be honest, he did turn into something. It's just the injuries caught up to him, and we never really benefited much from a guy like Wilson Chandler. I think Denver got a lot more out of Wilson Chandler than we did. Just thinking about now, that last year, right before we made the Melo trade, I go too far. Let's back it up a little bit. Let's end this decade first. And in the following year, we got the crowd favorite, the Garden favorite, Danilo Gallinari with the 6th pick in 2008. In 2009, I'm not making this up, we drafted Jordan Hill. Is it starting to get a little bit clearer now the closer I get to where we are right now, some of the picks and some of the mistakes we made? Basically, the point of the matter is we had no sense of direction in that decade in the early 2000s where we did not know or did not draft the right guys, because I'm not going to do it for the sake of myself and depressing myself going down the list, but there were a lot of names that we decided to pass on to get some of these guys because, like I said, Jordan Hill was the 8th pick. So the point of the matter was the Knicks just had no sense of direction, no sense of rebuild, no sense of what to do when it came to grassrooting a team, because we were still in that age where we felt like we needed to get the big stars. We're New York City. We got to get these guys in New York and play for the Knicks and do what the Knicks got to do. Okay. The 90s were just right around the corner where we was in there making the finals and doing this and doing that. We're the Knicks, crying out loud. We were going through all kinds of renovations from Madison Square Garden. We're doing all these kind of things, changing jerseys. So then the Knicks decided to do the move of all moves to start the next decade.
And fans on their feet for the Knicks captain.
With a superstar they so desperately needed, the Knicks are heading in the right direction.
All around me are familiar faces.
The 2010 to 2019 or 2020 decade. And this is where we are right now. Now, in this decade, we won a total of 304 games and lost a total of 451. Mind you, we did go through a lockout in the 2011 season, as well as we are not completely done with the 2019-2020 season, but with the record of 9-24. Is there really anything to say, well, we'll turn this thing around? There's not much turning around that's going to happen. I mean, we'd be lucky to get in the 20 win range, which we might do, but again, that's a prayer within itself. But in the 2010 to 2020 decade, the decade that we just finished or we're about to close out, we did reach the playoffs 3 times within the first 3 years of the new decade, which made a lot of Knicks fans like myself and a lot of you guys, I'm sure, believe that, you know what, we're making that turn, because we were finally, not only did we get our superstar, we managed to get another superstar within that same season, even though we were on a great climb without having or needing to make any trades. But no, we decided to trade away our whole entire life for Carmelo Anthony, which means we're going to not have many draft picks when we go down the draft recap in this next decade. But before we get there, let's go through the good times, shall we? Because like I said, the first 3 seasons of this new decade, the New York Knicks were back to being the talk of the town. Now, it was a steady climb, because in that first season, after a huge and hot start with Amari Stoudemire, Raymond Felton, Wilson Chandler, those boys, we ended up making the trade for Carmelo Anthony, and we slugged our way into the playoffs with a 42-40 record, only to lose in the first round under the coaching of Mike D'Antoni. And Mike D'Antoni would stay for half of another season, as we barely skated through a 36-30 2011-2012 season, where D'Antoni saw a record of 18-24, but with my guy, and a lot of you guys, I love Mike Woodson. I'm sorry, I'm a huge Mike Woodson stan, but Mike Woodson leading our team to an 18-6 record going into the playoffs, where we looked like we were one of the top teams. We were out there beating teams like the Miami Heat, who were hot at the time, and we were looking good. We were looking good atop the in the Eastern Conference with a record of 36-30. Like I said, that was the year of the lockout. To no avail, we still ended up losing in the first round in a very, very upsetting first round disappointment. But it was okay, because under Mike Woodson's leadership, we were able to not only come out of that loss or come out of that first round debacle looking good, we doubled down. Like, we went out there and we had one of our first 50 win seasons in damn near a decade and some change. Okay, we were 54-28 in that 2012-2013 season. My time being a Knicks fan, again, I am a 90s kid, but again, I was born in 1990, so like I didn't really get into the basketball, the love of the basketball game up until probably like 8 years old, 9 years old. So of course I loved those teams and loved what I saw from those teams. But, you know, being a teenager and, you know, being in college, you know, talking to your boys and going out and doing stuff and watching the games, and your New York Knicks are now on top of not just the Eastern Conference, the NBA. We were third at that time, and we were out there beating the Miami Heat. You know, I was friends with a lot of Laker fans who were coming off of, you know, their championships and stuff like that, but we're out there competing against them and stuff. So it was a good time to be, you know, a Knicks fan, you know, and I'm older now, so I'm getting it, and I'm talking about these things. I'm hyped about it. Tyson Chandler, you know, Carmelo Anthony, Amari Stoudemire, who was on and off, but Ahmad Shumpert, J.R. Smith, Jason Kidd, I can go on and on. The roster we had was fun to watch. It was old, but it was fun to watch, and Mike Woodson was out there leading us. You know, we were all kinds of things. It was just a good time to be a Knicks fan for a season. And to put the cherry on top of the whole entire Knicks Sunday, we beat the Celtics in the first round. And that was our NBA Finals as a Knicks family. We were insanely excited to see the Knicks not only make it to the second round of the playoffs for the first time in God knows how many years, but to do it against the Boston Celtics, who you can see their big three was at the final stage of their time together. But we didn't care because we saw Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Rajon Rondo, and Ray Allen over on that team, as well as the fact that that was still the Boston Celtics. So we didn't care about any of that. We just cared about the fact that that was the Boston Celtics game beat by our New York Knicks. And it was great. I enjoyed every second of it. Melo out there cooking. Paul Pierce. Couldn't ask for anything better. Only for KG and Paul Pierce to then go to Brooklyn. But we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. But then, unfortunately, the fall started to happen once again, and the good times slowly went back to being bad times just as fast as they were good times all over again. Mike Woodson would be let go the following season after leading us to a not as good season of a 37-45 record. Then Phil Jackson came in, and that summer happened where everybody was very excited and very hopeful for the change. We had all kinds of names and all kinds of coaches that were looking to come in, and we brought in Derek Fisher, who had never coached before and was not even going to be able to run whatever kind of system he would want to run in his first year as a head coach, because Phil Jackson was upstairs saying, we're doing it my way. And the decline started because Derek Fisher would come in and give us a mediocre season, actually tying for our worst season in Knicks history. I say tying. At the time, it was the worst. We tied it last year with David Fisdale. Derek Fisher coming in his first year, having the worst season, to only be fired halfway through the next season to bring in Kurt Rambis, who at one time was supposed to be Phil Jackson's protege, but he came in, he was not much better when he coached us. Then to hire a fast-paced head coach with a slow-paced team and not the right players around to play Jeff Hornacek style for 2 seasons, and then he gets fired. And then the Messiah that a lot of us, including myself, were excited about, David Fisdale, gets hired for him to tie Derek Fisher in the worst season in Knicks history and to almost get fired the following season in the exact same fashion as Derek Fisher. 2 tremendously horrific blowouts by 30 points or more to then bring in the interim coach Mike Miller for us at this time, and Kurt Rambis over there. The only difference is Mike Miller can actually coach, and right now we're in the midst of the Mike Miller era, and that is where we are right now. But before we even get to the end and talk about stuff, we have to go down the list of draft picks, because the theme of the Knicks story is our lack of developing and getting the right pieces. But let's go down the draft hole that we went through in this last decade, shall we? Now, as I mentioned earlier, we did make the trade for Carmelo Anthony, so we did not have a lot of first round picks going into some of these years. One of the years being the 2010 year, where we had 2 second round picks where we drafted guys like Andy Routens and Landry Fields.
I mean, listen to me, I'm speechless.
I'm a huge Landry Fields fan. I love Landry Fields, but Andy Routens, really? Like, I get it, Syracuse, like, I understand, but really, like, but man, Landry Fields was so much fun. From all the Modell's commercials, from YouTube stuff, to doing the Go New York song on YouTube. Like, I loved everything about Landry Fields. Landry Fields was one of my favorite players to don the Knicks jersey as a second round draft pick. He had a great rookie season. That was it. The following year, we drafted a guy like Iman Shumpert, who at the time, and Brandon Warren, y'all know Wars World can attest, I hated him. I was not ready for Iman Shumpert. I wanted a guy like freaking Chris Singleton. Not a proud moment. I didn't think Shumpert was going to be the player he was. Now, mind you, he still wasn't the top level that we thought, especially at the point of the draft where we drafted him. But we also have to remember that that was a weak draft. There were players that we did let go instead of him, but at the same time, he wasn't a bad pickup for the spot that we picked him up at. Iman Shumpert. I love Iman Shumpert to this day. He's a free agent. Pick him up, Knicks. We didn't have a pick in 2012. Then 2013, we drafted Tim Hardaway Jr. I was really excited about Tim Hardaway Jr. I liked what he did in college the year before. He was a offensive. To me, he looked like he was going to be an offensive juggernaut. I thought he was going to be like a Jamal Crawford light, but he turned out to be a J.R. Smith light, and not the good kind of light, J.R. Smith. Then that following year, again, no first round picks in 2014 where we drafted Klay Anthony early and Thanasis Antetokounmpo. Now, mind you, we were all excited about those two picks. At the time, we were thinking like, yo, we might got the next Giannis, and you know what? Klay Anthony might end up being a surprise in the draft. We were doubly wrong, but you know what? Whatever. Thanasis went on to be an MVP in the Greece League, and look at him now. He's probably going to get a championship with his brother over in Milwaukee, all right? We all make mistakes, okay? We just need something to be excited about, all right? We don't want to hear it. And then 2015, to me, I would say 2015 was the draft where you can start to see the Knicks were finally figuring it out on the right type of players to bring in. Mind you, you could talk about the Kevin Knox draft, and we should have got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all these other names, and we can go down the list for a lot of these guys. But the point of the matter is we got good rookies from the 2015 season to now compared to years in the past. Kristaps Porzingis, who we drafted in the 2015 draft, ended up being the guy that he is right now. Mind you, he did have that very big injury, and you know what? You can sit there and hate Kristaps Porzingis all you want, but we have to remember when he was a Knick, he was a damn good one. Mind you, there was still a lot of question marks and still a lot of worry when it came to Kristaps Porzingis, but as a Knick, he was still a damn good Knick regardless. He was almost an all-star. I mean, he was voted as one, but he didn't play it. Some barely count it, but he was an all-star. We also drafted guys like Frank Ntilikina and Damian Dotson, which ended the Phil Jackson era, and that are the only two Phil Jackson players still on this New York Knicks squad. Damian Dotson showing to be a very good two-way player, as well as Frank Ntilikina, who's still looking for that offense, but his value, well, his value is being seen, but then it's still, I don't know. I don't understand what the Knicks are doing with Frank Ntilikina, but we can see his value. He's had a great stretch of games this year. He's had a mediocre stretch as well, and he's had his bad stretches as he normally does, but the good outweighed the bad more so for me for the first time in his career as a New York Knick this season. And Frank Ntilikina has been fun for us, for a lot of us to watch, whether you hate him or love him. And then back to the Kevin Knox draft back in 2017, we were able to draft 2018, where we drafted Kevin Knox and Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson, probably one of the anchors to our team right now. Kevin Knox, still not really sure where he is. I mean, we could talk about his regression. He has regressed this season, hasn't been utilized the same way he was the year before. He's shown that with more minutes he plays, its production is a lot higher, but to get those minutes, you have to produce a lot better. So Kevin Knox is in a weird conundrum, but when you're 20 years old and you're in your second year in the NBA, you can do that. That's the part of growing and learning in the NBA, and hopefully the Knicks will understand that, or we'll send him away so some other team can understand that. We'll see Kevin Knox killing us in the Garden at some point. And leading then now to this last draft where we drafted the 3rd overall pick, RJ Barrett, who came out on a tear in his first few months as a New York Knick. Right now he's been hitting the wall very early. I mean, mind you, he has been playing a lot of minutes. Call it what you want. People can say maybe defenses have figured him out, whatever you want to say. Point of the matter is RJ Barrett might be the future, might be that guy that we should be excited about. Maybe he's that Kristaps Porzingis, but that actually wants to be in New York and actually wants to be the difference for the Knicks. All I'm trying to say is we're now here in 2020. As you can see throughout this video, the light got darker and darker because I'm recording it in the afternoon, so I apologize. So I'm gonna wrap this up here. But we're in 2020 now. The point of the matter is, in the last 2 decades, the New York Knicks have had one problem only, and that was getting in our own way. The New York Knicks, we've continued to be our own worst enemy, from draft, from free agency, and from just our overall mindset to be a good team. Now, mind you, yes, we had 3 years of success when we did have veterans around us, but then now that we're in an era where, you know, players can go wherever they want to play, do whatever they want to do, promote whatever they want to promote, wherever they are, whether it be Utah or Los Angeles. The point of the matter is the New York Knicks, have to understand that they need to get with the times. We need to build from the ground up and make ourselves attractive rather than just trying to sell the whole New York Knicks, we are the Knicks sales pitch that just hasn't been working in years past. So hopefully in 2020, with draft picks like I mentioned towards the end of Mitchell Robinson, RJ Barrett, that's hopefully the next step for what's to come. You know, right now we're on our way to looking like we have a possibility to draft a guy like LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman. You know, these are guys that could be franchise changers along with a guy like a RJ Barrett. Or do we make a trade for a Karl Anthony Towns or any of these other superstars, D'Angelo Russell? Or do we just ride with what we got and possibly find some sort of diamond in the rough with a guy that we've been very critical on, but ended off 2019 in the right foot with Julius Randle? Who knows? So many questions, so little time, but a new decade is upon us. Will this be the decade we talk about saying we made it through, guys? The 2020 decade is our decade. Let me know in the comment section below. What do you think the overlining problem has been with the New York Knicks in the past 2 decades? I would love to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. I appreciate every single one of you guys for sitting through this one. It's the end of a year, man. Happy New Year to all you guys. Be safe. I hope you guys are out there partying and have a good time. If you're not of age, I hope you're still having a good time going into the new year the right way with families, friends, whoever it may be. But if you're a Knicks fan and you're with me, you know what it is. We got to keep our mind on the right thing and hope for the basketball gods above that there is going to be some sort of change and something coming our way in this new decade. Or will it be another decade of the same? I'd love to hear all your guys' opinions in the comments below. Remember, guys, go check out the merch. Go get yourself some new merch. Mitchell Robinson merch in the store. RJ Barrett merch on its way. CK Crew, whether you're a Knicks fan or not, go pick yourself up some CK Crew merch. We got the regular and we got the Metro designs up there. Go check it out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you can get notified every time one of these videos are up. Much love to you guys. 15,000 subscribers to end the year. I ain't mad at it. Let's go for 20. We coming for 20K. CK 20K coming for this next year. Let's get it, y'all. Much love to all the support, all of you guys. Let's get this new year right. Let's get it. I'll see you guys in the next video next year. I'm out. Peace.
Feeling like I won the lotto. Always taking trips with a new chick, asking where the time goes. And I wonder if this is all I'll know.